The transfer portal's open, and Washington has a whole lot it needs to address.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Raymond Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. I'm the site editor over the Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. And right off the top, we've got some breaking news. Lars, today, as we record this on Wednesday, April 17th, it is your birthday. Happy birthday, all our everydayers. Be sure to leave a comment down below. Let Lars know. Happy birthday. We're not going to disclose how old you are because that doesn't matter anymore. But no, I just want to make sure we got that out in there right at the top. And Lars, for your birthday, the transfer portal opened. And Washington's got a lot of needs. So any gifts you want to see under the tree outside of maybe a couple of offensive linemen? I know we're going to get there as well.
Right, I was gonna say, why are we talking realistically, or could we just say, to Tyrona, maybe,
Cormani McClain.
I was gonna say Cormani McClain. Well, we even joked at practice when there was a helicopter that this is gonna be my birthday present right here. So we're at practice on Tuesday, and we would just like to shoot the breeze every now and then when the team doesn't do 11-ons because there's not too much to watch when you're doing a drill midway through practice. We see this blue helicopter kind of just pull over because it didn't look like a life flight helicopter or anything like that. Pulls over the practice, kind of starts making a turn, and we're like, "Oh, who is that? Is that Tyrone McMillan?" It's like, no, it's probably Cormani McClain. Now that you think about it, and we just started busting out laughing and things like that. So no, I don't believe either of those two will end up. But again, there's a number of positions I think at Washington. There might be a couple, former or current Arizona commits that didn't end up playing there that might work out for Washington. I am curious. I think there will be. This isn't a bold prediction, but I think there's at least two players, maybe even three, that are going to be coming in this spring portal period that we haven't even mentioned. And I mean that in terms of like either a position or player where it's like, oh, wow, that's kind of a unique off the wall find. And didn't really think you get somebody from, let's just say, the East Coast or the Southeast to come all the way up to Washington. But then there's also the ones that we kind of might expect, right? A Philip Blidi, a Marcus Bryant, a couple people from down south, if you want to call it that. And when I say down south, I mean on the West Coast, not
the Southwest.
The Southwest, there we go. But yeah, there's a number of players and what I think I have noticed though is they are offering some younger players as well with 3 and 4 years experience, where we saw Jackson Howard get an offer. Looks like he's more of a linebacker than an edge, which he came out of high school in. I do remember Washington actually offered him under the Jimmy Lake era of coaching. I want to say, I think that was, or maybe it was Kalen. I don't know, but I know one of those two staffs offered him when he was coming out of Minnesota. So there is a little bit of familiarity with some of these guys. And then I think the one thing that I thought about last night was you have to go back and look at some of these guys. Who did Arizona host for visits over the last 3 years when Jedd Fisch was the head coach of the Wildcats? And then who are the guys that are in the portal? And is there any overlap? Because already those are some guys, no matter really what position, there's at least a familiarity with the staff. But doing that research, I'm not really great with the whole IT thing. So if we could get somebody to do a database of like players that visited, you just type in this and there's like a couple of keywords, that would be a lifesaver for both of us.
Oh yeah, if there's some kind of spreadsheet out there, that'd be fantastic. Now, with that being said, because the way I kind of thought about this exercise was I just went through positions where we know that that Jedd Fisch, Brennan Carroll want 5 or 6 scholarship offensive linemen. They've said that. And we'll see how many of them come from Arizona, where it sounds like Wendell Moe, as we record this on Tuesday afternoon, an Arizona offensive lineman might be entering the transfer portal. That's what some of their insiders are kind of hinting at. And that would be an interesting one where he is an interior offensive lineman. Be nice to see him kind of slide in at guard. Really nice size. I believe last I saw he's listed 6'2", 330, where just real nice size. I think he's somebody who obviously Brennan Carroll and Jedd Fisch really liked him down there, that he'd translate very well into the scheme up here. And we talked about Matthew Lato. We talked about Raymond Pulido on yesterday's show. But outside of that, I'd love to see a receiver in here. I'd love to see a tight end. I'd love to see now 2 defensive tackles after we saw Anthony James into the transfer portal, where we'll kind of see what that ends up looking like, where maybe one of them is in the mold, Lars, that you continue to allude to, where it's a redshirt freshman or a sophomore, somebody that has 3 or 4 years of eligibility remaining, where maybe it's somebody who has a small role this year and then the coaching staff can continue to develop over the next couple of seasons. But that's kind of where I'm looking at this right now, where another running back would be really helpful in that RB3 kind of role, a wide receiver, whether it be somebody who, pushes for our starting spot, or somebody who's just going to fill in on the 2 deeps and be somebody who can, kind of like you said, the Jeremy Bernard role, where certainly not, going to be that caliber of player, but somebody who fits that kind of role, where I think that Keith Reynolds could do that pretty well. Rashid Williams might be able to as well, but just getting somebody else in there where you're not relying on so many true freshmen at that position, especially when you see 2 stars in the mix like Denzel Boston and Jeremiah Hunter. And then you and I have talked about tight end, where it's Quentin Moore right now. And then just with the amount of plays we've seen Decker DeGraff make, there's starting to be a case to be made for him as tight end 2 on this roster. But you'd like to see some more experience in there, whether it's, a young player with some of that just extra eligibility and maybe somebody who played a decent amount last season, or maybe a graduate transfer, an upperclassman who's just looking to make a bunch of catches, get something else on film, where that's also something that this offense could use.
Right, exactly. I think that's kind of the key with the tight end position, is you're kind of just looking for an all-around guy, but not with with a lot of experience, right? I don't think necessarily you want to bring in another, redshirt freshman or even sophomore, especially with Charlie Kroll coming in the fall, where we saw him at practice as well over the past week, and he's like, oh yeah, that's a big kid. Like there's no slouch in that. So I don't think you're looking young there. I think you're looking old there. And then one position kind of that I'm also intrigued about is, do you need to add safety depth, right? Where again, Vincent Holmes, receiver, DB, whichever you want to. I think the point about receiver, do you want insurance at another position that maybe you're fine at, but do you want an extra body just in case?
So I see where you're going with that. And part of me is leaning towards no at safety. And it's something I wrote about over on Huskies Wire. Make sure you go check it out, where I wrote about Peyton Waters. And we talked to Vinny Sunseri on Tuesday, who said he was really impressed with what he'd seen from Peyton so far this spring. And there are still 3 more true freshman safeties coming in, where I think obviously not all of them are going to play, but I think the last thing you're going to want to see for that is them bringing in extra insurance, where Jedd has talked a lot about getting some of these younger guys playing time. And I think this is that one position where, when you look at it, Paul Menke was a 4-star, Peyton Waters was a 4-star, Rashawn Clark was a 4-star, and then Raheem Wright was a mid-tier 3-star. But right there, where, they're both those guys, all those guys, there are still some questions about each of them, obviously being freshmen. Some of them need to work on just adding muscle and things like that. But they all look like they could make an impact. And I wouldn't be surprised if 1 or 2 of them ends up burning their red shirt this year, just from simply Jedd Fisch backing up one thing that he's said a whole lot over the course of his first couple months on the job, is we are going to play freshmen. And I just feel like that's a little bit more of an important position to see that happen than at wide receiver, where we've seen some really, really exciting high-end talent from the starters, where, we can see some of those other guys develop and you can bring in an experienced body.
Right. And to your point on all that, now that we've kind of checked off they don't need a safety, let's go back to the tight end, because I was looking at the guys in the portal. Let's just say, on a talent perspective and on a expectation perspective, you might be looking at a tight end 2 or 3. But the one thing about the tight end position, when I start to look at who's in the portal, there's nobody that right off the bat is like, oh, instantly plug and play that guy next to Quentin Moore and you're safe, and Decker to kind of stagger up. I think what we've seen in the combination from Decker being able to show his pass catching ability, you might just want an extra body with 2 or 3 years experience in there, where you don't necessarily need a grad transfer at tight end.
Right. You
do probably at center, but I think a tight end that you can kind of get a little more flexible with that. And Jordan Paupo, again, is the wizard of tight ends. You're probably betting on him to figure that one out no matter who he picks.
Right. Lars, with that being said, we're halfway through spring practice. Let's review. right after a message from our friends over at Yahoo Finance, because this couldn't exist without the help of our sponsors, like our friends over at Yahoo Finance. Let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising cost of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. You can securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. So, Lars, we're halfway through spring practice, and we've seen a lot. Our good friend Dan Rayleigh over at Inside the Huskies, he wrote about Denzel Boston being the best player in camp, so shout out to him for that, because something we've been saying a lot, something I feel like it's just a very unified, just an all-encompassing view of every member of the media who's been at Husky practice. So outside of Denzel Boston, let's review. Just where are we? What stands out? What still needs to improve? And any takeaways that you've had through the first 7 practices.
Yeah, so aside from all the Denzel Boston talk, I'm going to go basically the group trying to stop Denzel Boston and company. That's the defensive backs, right? I think that's one position where, especially when we came back from last season, you're thinking, okay, Jabbar is gone. Bring in Ephesians Prysock. What's the rest of the room going to look like? Well, I think the main takeaway has been the coaching in that room. Like just aside, again, you can't underscore the addition of Ephesians Prysock, but with or without him, I think just kind of the vibe in that room seems to be rejuvenated. We've seen Devon Banks make a number of plays. We've seen Elijah Jackson, compete with the 1s and 2s. Thaddeus Dixon always he's not shy from contact, except for the one time when he covers Denzel and there was no release and Denzel gets a touchdown. I was like, wait a minute, okay, the one you need at least some contact on Denzel here. But with that being said, the rest of that room, I kind of like what I've seen. Leroy Bryant's made an emergence. Curly Reed, I think, is still trying to get up to speed in the scheme. I think if you're looking at that freshman class, it's probably Leroy, Curly, and then Caleb Presley at the cornerback position. And then, Peyton Waters, you highlighted it in the first segment where I see, no fear there. And then you just imagine what Paul Mickey and the rest of that group can do when they come in the fall. But I think it's been good to see some of those young guys not be shy. They're taking the good coaching. And then, again, we touched on it. You have Vinny Sunseri, NFL experience, played at Alabama. You have John Richardson. Anywhere that guy goes, whether it's Wyoming, Washington State, Arizona, and now Washington, you're going to get at least 1 or 2 defensive backs that you're getting drafted. Now, again, this year is going to have an easy one with Ephesians Prysock, but I still think Devon Banks, there's a number of guys in that room that can get developed and become draftable with his coaching and the assistance of Armand Hawkins, because I've noticed he's been going through some drills as well with those guys. Yeah. And so just that kind of just pick your poison there, whether at any position group in the secondary. I think that's kind of a pleasant surprise where, we are seeing a lot from Denzel, but it's also good coverage. Where like Denzel's making great plays. It's not like, oh, wow, he just housed some, 60-yarder against the 13 walk-on DB. It's like, no, this is actually good ones versus good ones, which is what you want to see.
Absolutely. I really like where you're going with all that. I will say I want to flip around to the other side of the ball, because my biggest takeaway has been Damon Williams. I feel like we just can't say enough good things about him, where his athleticism continues to shine through day in and day out. I love what he can do with the ball. And I really enjoy watching him throw to all levels of the field, because he's such an advanced processor for his age. I feel like that's one thing we haven't really touched on enough, is he sees the field so well. And, you and I were talking to our buddy Alex Katzen yesterday, and one of the things that he noted was we haven't talked about his height at all yet, because it's not an issue. And we're going to continue not talking about it because it's not a problem. And, if one day down the line we're talking about him as an NFL draft prospect, sure, that conversation might arise, but it's not going to be from us. because we've seen it and we know what he's done so far in practice. And yeah, it's probably going to be a different story once you get into the game and we see a few different things, but it has not been an issue. And all he has shown is a really high understanding of the game of football. It already feels like the college level has kind of slowed down for him, which is really nice and really fun to see. Where, you look at DeMarcius Davis on the other hand, we look at Austin Mack last year, and it's not a knock on either of those guys, because both of them were also early enrollee, true freshmen, Austin Mack being 17. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do, is to be an elite processor that early on in your development. And we still have really high hope for Austin Mack. We'd love to see what he's going to do. But just seeing where Demond is compared to even Will Rogers in a certain sense, where it already feels like he's on a similar plane as a processor to where Will Rogers is, and that's a fifth-year senior.
Yeah, no, I think the one takeaway that I've had with respect to his kind of awareness and just understanding of the game and having it slowed down is his pocket awareness, where it's when he knows the pocket's breaking down, he's not looking to go out. I've noticed pretty much almost more often than not, there might be like 8 out of 10 times he's doing this. He's trying to find a way to slither up the middle. He's looking up. He's looking downfield. He's trying to find. Now, again, there are times where pressure comes from one side or another. Yeah, he's got to roll out left or roll out right. But I noticed he really is always keeping his eyes downfield, and he's not just using the legs like, oh, okay, well, I guess play breaks down in 2 seconds. I'm now just going to say screw it and run. No, he's still looking for those passes, and he's still hitting the checkdowns, which I think is good. And then again, the obvious thing that we don't even need to waste more than 2 seconds on is height was never a concern. Yeah. It's even less of a concern now, where it's like the only question is just making sure, hey, can you see downfield? Or is it a guess? And you can clearly tell with the zip and delivery that he has on the ball, not just his short routes, but intermediate and deep routes. He can see where those routes are supposed to go. And to your point about his football IQ, that's how you can overcome that height is, okay, I now notice the launch angle has to be a little bit further cocked back, whereas sometimes he's throwing the sidearm. Sometimes you can see he has different launch angles with his throw. And already as a freshman, like, it explains why he went 33-1 at Basham. Like, it just you right. See it right there, where it's like, yeah, both him and DeMarcius are 4-star quarterbacks, but not all 4-stars are built the same. Not all 4-stars come packaged the same. And that's, again, same thing with Austin Mack. Like, you can replace DeMarcius with Austin Mack and vice versa. That doesn't really matter who you're saying it about. It's no disrespect intended. It's just there are some kids that, again, DeMarcius could end up actually being the better quarterback down the road, right? Where it's 2-3 years down the line, he's developed. It's like, well, okay, his high end, his top end was better, but maybe it's also better by like that much, right? Because clearly Demond is going to be right up there with him.
Absolutely. So there's one other thing I wanted to make sure we touched on, because, we've talked about the offensive line. We talked about the pass rush a lot over this last week or so. One group that I feel that we need to hit on is the running backs. And when we're talking about halfway through spring practice, I'm going to narrow this down and say Arizona running backs, because I've been really impressed by Adam Muhammad. I really like what I've seen from him. We saw him get some first team reps yesterday on Tuesday, but Jonah Coleman too, man, where you and I continue to talk about him. We continue to talk about him with everybody on the sidelines, whether it be Alex, Ben, Nick, Christian Capel, whoever it is that we're talking to over there, and shout out to all those guys. But I'm so excited to watch him run in just full contact, just against somebody else, because he's going to run through some people. And we saw how good he was last year at Arizona. And I think he could have a very similar impact this year, while maybe not being asked to be utilized nearly as much as he was at certain points last year. And I just think that that's going to do nothing but improve what we've already seen from him. And he's going to just, I don't want to say be a star and just put just those expectations behind him, but he was one of the best running backs in the country last year per PFF grades. And I feel like he can do that again here behind a decent offensive line.
Right. And even without the offensive line, just take away when you watch him in 7-on-7 when they do wheel routes, where he's a fluid pass catcher as well. So, and when you put all those traits together, he's incredibly tough to tackle, where we've seen a number of guys really have to, work to actually tackle him. And he's even shed some, not even arm tackles, but just like you have him wrapped up around the stomach, and somehow he's still going up the field. It's like, okay, we're in pads. We are live tackling. This isn't just, oh, okay, I'm going to let it off because we're in practice and you're on teammate. It's like, no, these guys are trying to tackle him and he's just shedding him like it's nothing. And so I think how he'll be utilized as a pass catcher could also, to your point, say, what if we have Adam Muhammad lined up as a running back and we split out Jonah Coleman, so we're getting the ball into one of their hands, but it's not as a run where he's taking as much contact. We're utilizing his ability in space because, again, he's very compact. but he's very tough to tackle too. So it's like it's a win-win, and using him just as a running back would be a disservice at this point.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more there. And then I kind of want to get some more of your thoughts on Adam Muhammad, because I feel like he's somebody where we're going to see him in a couple games this year, but down the road, he looks like somebody who could make a big impact and just be one of these typical, we've seen so many of them at Washington, under-recruited guys that turns into a big contributor. Where right as you take a drink, where I really like everything we've seen from him. And he looks like somebody who could be a 3-down back. If he was asked to play that role, I don't think that's ever going to be, there's ever going to be a true 3-down back in this offense, but he looks like somebody who could fill that role if needed.
Yeah, no, there's another shout out to somebody who's on the sideline. Kim Greno's made this point to me. He looks like a young Richard Newton before he filled that. Before, that for when he was like a freshman, a redshirt freshman. I don't believe you were covering the team at that point, but he was like, okay, you could see him getting bigger, right? And then when he does, watch out, where you see that Jonah Coleman ass, but even bigger, where it's like, hey, when he puts a little bit more weight on him, he already doesn't look like a true freshman. Like, I think he looks like a redshirt freshman or a true sophomore at this point, just physically how he looks and how he plays in 11-on-11. But then you add one more year in the weight room with Tyler Owens and whoever his friend is that has the 48-inch bicep,
the insanely jacked arms, whose workout plan I need to get on.
Or that's the best as I can describe it. If once you get a system in the off season with him, Adam Muhammad might be. I know this is going to sound like high praise, but I think he could be even more elusive than what Jonah Coleman has shown in his time in college, and that's saying something.
Hey, we love bold predictions on this show. And Lars, with that being said, let's switch gears here a little bit, because as the everydayers listen to this, we're a week away from the NFL draft. And we'll get there right after a message from our friends over at Monopoly Go, because I need you all to listen up for this huge announcement. I've been tracking the leaderboards every day, keeping my eye on the scores and putting all my heart into it, and I'm super pumped to announce that I am finally on top. That's right. Obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on classic Monopoly, and you can play anywhere, anytime. You explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. You can charge rent on iconic properties just like classic Monopoly. You can charge your friends rent on your iconic properties, or you can go after their Monopoly money by pulling bank heights and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. But my favorite part is the leaderboards, where you can see who's a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. So get yourself on the charts. You can download Monopoly Go, which is now free on the App Store and Google Play. So I'm a huge draft nerd. I know all the everydayers know that. I know that they know that. I know we both do, but I in particular just have been following the draft for so long, and I've never been as excited for a UW centric draft like I am with this one. We're probably going to see the most Huskies out of any just draft class get taken, and I'm really excited because there's been a big buzz over the national media in the last couple of weeks, where Ben Solak over at The Ringer is somebody who I really enjoy listening to. He was doing sleepers, guys who probably won't go in the first or second round, that he thinks could be, or it's finding the next Puka Nacua, which, as Husky fans know, especially, you can't really do that. But if you had to put your money on somebody breaking a catch record, he went with Jalen McMillan, which I thought was really fun. And now Ja'Lynn Polk is getting into the first round of certain mock drafts, like Peter Schrager's, who had him going 32nd overall to the Kansas City Chiefs.
I was going to say, the acknowledgement is what I was going for there. But just, yeah, where, like, again, it's one of those, when we keep looking at Ja'Lynn Polk, it's like, again, I can understand why teams initially viewed him as a second rounder, like an early to mid second round pick. But when you look at his ability, catch radius, things that he can do in an offense, like, there was a reason Rome Odunze was allowed to, again, this is not taken away from Rome, but like, when you also still have to factor in a Ja'Lynn Polk when Jalen McMillan went down, Polk could still go for 3 for 155, and it's a solid day at the office. And I think that's why he's been kind of rising up the boards, is because teams are realizing, oh, this is Rome and Jalen kind of benefiting each other more so than, oh, well, that's Ja'Lynn Polk only succeeded because he had Rome Odunze the opposite. It's like, no, that's not necessarily the case. Now, again, he did have the really one unfortunate game, right, against Oregon State. But I think aside from that, like, you put him in any game, he was just a guy every single time, deep ball over the middle, tough catch on the sideline. He really could make it all. And now, again, he doesn't have the speed that Rome Odunze does, right? He doesn't have some of the other traits that make him like a top end pick. like there's certainly enough traits there to make him a first round pick, which again, a lot of that credit has to go to Jamarcus Shepard getting him in that position and coaching him up from what he came into at Washington.
Absolutely. And something when the more we talk about Ja'Lynn Polk, especially, we just continue to praise his hands and continue to praise just how tough he is. And those are two things that NFL teams love. And it's fun when you think about him going 32nd overall to the Chiefs, where he's probably going to play a lot in the slot and can do a whole lot of things over the middle, where he loves going over the middle, man. Where I reserve this term because it's mainly derogatory, but with Ja'Lynn Polk, I feel as it's the highest of compliments, where he's a true psycho. Like, that's the only way to put it. He loves going over the middle. He loves taking these big hits and popping right back up, because he holds on to everything when he does go over the middle. So I love that, and seeing that combination with Patrick Mahomes would be so much fun, and I would certainly be taking him earlier than people would expect me to in dynasty fantasy football drafts. So if any of my friends who are in dynasty leagues are listening to this, they're probably not, but I probably just gave way too much information there, because he's just such a fun prospect to watch. And you can say that about so many Huskies in this draft. And I feel like one guy who we have to continue talking about him whenever we just have these draft conversations is Troy Fautanu, where I hate switching gears that quickly like that, but Troy Fautanu is somebody who might not even make it out of the top 10 at this point. And it's so cool to see that rise as well, where you talked about with Ja'Lynn Polk, where, oh yeah, he was viewed as this, and over the draft process, he's been a big riser. I think there hasn't been a bigger riser throughout just the entire draft than Troy Fautanu, where I remember listening to stuff last summer, even in December, into January, where it's, oh yeah, Troy Fautanu is really good. We really like him. Oh yeah, he went from a high-end day 2 pick because we think he's going to play guard, to, oh yeah, he can be a back end of the first round guy, to all of a sudden, can the Seahawks take him at 16 and he can play left guard? And now it's, will the Jets take him at 10? And that rise has been so much fun to watch, because I love Troy. I've loved watching his rise and seeing him just not only get a chance to get taken that high, but as somebody who really does deserve all of that, and somebody who has that flexibility and such a high ceiling. It's really cool to see how it's all developed for him.
No doubt. I think that's the one thing I think teams kind of keyed in on over the draft process with Troy, was he's nowhere near at his peak, right? Where he's been very high, right? He's a high caliber take, right? But there's still 2 or 3 more gears I think that he can find and develop in his game before he truly reaches that like perennial all-pro level. And if you're taking him in, like, let's say 10 to 12, 13 range, or even let's just say 8 to 15, just to make it safe, that's a perfect first round pick, because again, to our point, whether you start him out at guard or tackle, he's proven he can play both, right? Probably in the NFL, his size and things like that are better suited for guard. But I don't think that in a couple of years, let's say if somebody wants to retire, you can't kick him out, right? There's a number of teams where
he can start a tackle right now, depending on where he goes. I'm sorry to cut you off, but truly he could. Where if the Saints take him at 14, he could slide in a tackle right away and replace Trevor Penning or Ryan Ramczyk, depending on what happens with his knee. But the Jets right now, he starts off at left guard. If Tyron Smith gets hurt, which he has a propensity to do, or just anybody else on that offensive line, he could flip around and just be really, really fluid up front.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking with the Jets pick at 10. If you start him at guard, that's fine, because he can easily be a day 1 starter. And then if an unfortunate injury happens, again, just nature of the beast, that's an easy slide over. And then again, you're not wasting a top 10 pick on a guard, right? And Troy's not a guard by trade. He's basically an offensive lineman by trade. I think the only position he didn't play at Washington was center. So, and I'm sure probably, knowing Troy, he could figure that out pretty quick. Like, Troy somehow could be your emergency 3rd or 4th string center if you really needed to in a pinch, just because he's that athletic and that has such a high football IQ, or he'll figure that one out. But yeah, like putting him a tackle or guard, and that's why I think he's also risen, where teams initially thought he could just be a guard, and then that's why my Ben Grubbs example, where Joe Staley, Ben Grubbs, combination of both, but as a higher prospect, and that's no disrespect to Joe Staley and Ben Grubb, who I believe played 16, 20 years almost combined in the NFL, somewhere in that range. Again, like neither of them were slouches, but that's why they went late first round. And why Troy goes early first round is because he's both of them already higher
plus
level.
The athleticism.
Plus the athleticism, and can do both, not just one or the other.
All right. 60 seconds here. I've got a rant before we get out of here. it's Michael Penix time, where Penix, over the last couple of days, we've seen him take some visits to the Jets. Not the Jets, the Giants. Thank you for the arrow. Much needed, much appreciated. We've seen him take visits with the Giants, with the Raiders, with the Broncos, with some of these other teams, with the Falcons, which is an interesting fit. I don't love that. And then over the last couple of days, we've also seen him visit with the Washington Commanders and my New England Patriots, where let's get ahead of this, where, there are always going to be commenters, especially, on some social media sites that I will not be mentioning, but that will say, oh, he'd go to the Patriots. No, I don't like that at all. Where I don't think that's going to happen, especially number 3 overall. If they trade back, I'd like to see that. The Patriots are doing their due diligence on all quarterbacks. It's going to depend on what happens at number 2. If Jaden Daniels goes number 2, I think they take Drake May at number 3. If Drake May goes number 2, I feel like they might trade back. But again, besides the point, that this is more of a me conversation than it is anything else. But on top of that, I really am very curious about what happens to Mike. He shouldn't make it out of the first round, in my opinion. I've talked to scouts who have him rated as high as their 3rd quarterback on the board. And just moving forward, I don't think that that's the best fit for him, but I like the Minnesota fit if by some chance that's who they end up going with. Or I really like the Raiders fit, the Seahawks. I don't know if that would happen because they have more pressing needs early on in the draft, but I'm just really curious to see what happens there. And it was interesting to note that Penix did get some of these visits with teams that are selecting inside the top 5. And yeah, it looks like they all brought a whole lot of quarterbacks in on visits at the same time, especially Washington, who had 4 guys there at once. But I just feel that it needs to be noted, and it's very interesting just to see what teams seem to be zeroing in on him with a week to go before the draft. And wherever he goes, I'm going to be very, very intrigued by that fit. And Lars, with that being said, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. Please stay tuned, because as you're listening to this, we will probably be on our way to Washington's 8th spring practice. We're going to have so much more coming from that. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. And please leave us a comment down below if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it all really does help us out. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Friday.